Welcome to Spiritual as Fuck,
Spiritual as Fuck.
a podcast where we explore everything outside of the ordinary. I'm Liz Volpe. I'm a social entrepreneur, now psychic medium, teacher and mentor, with a huge passion to inspire people to dream big and change the world.
I'm Diane Driscoll, a coach, facilitator and speaker. I'm also a psychic intuitive, learning to incorporate my spiritual gifts into my life and business.
We're here today to share real and raw spiritual stories. It's going to give you a safe space to challenge what's normal and have some serious fun along the way.
We hope you're ready to get spiritual as fuck. In this episode, we have the honour of interviewing Debbie Malone, Australia's #1 psychic detective. As an internationally acclaimed psychic medium, author, psychic detective and spiritual teacher, Debbie has spent more than 30 years assisting police departments around the globe with high-profile missing persons and murder investigations. Debbie is a best-selling international author and makes regular appearances in the media and is in high demand for speaking engagements and interviews on television and radio. A student of the prestigious Arthur Findlay College and renowned spiritual teacher in her own right, Debbie regularly leads spiritual workshops and retreats. She is also the psychic in residence at New Idea Magazine, Australia. In this episode, we discuss the heavy topic of murder and missing persons cases that Debbie has worked on. We talk about how she receives her information and the impact that this work has had on her life. We also hear the glorious stories of Debbie's Soul Quest trip visiting spiritual sites across the UK, and we gain some interesting insights into Debbie's views of the major shifts occurring in the world right now. So buckle up, tune in, this is going to be a pretty awesome episode.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I say good morning, but you could be tuning in from any one of the 90 countries, so I apologise. But welcome back. We are here this week with, I'm going to say, probably one of the most interesting guests that we have had on to date, which is a pretty big call. But we do have some great stories that we share in Spiritual as Fuck. But today, Debbie Malone is going to share her story. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of a clip here. We're going to go from 7 near-death experiences all the way through to becoming a psychic detective, and now how the future looks now for not just Debbie and us, but for all of us out there in the world. So this is going to be really interesting. Diane, I'm going to hand to you to start on this one.
Well, I think Liz knows that I've been chomping at the bit to ask this question of you, Debbie, because I have followed your work for so long. But one of the things that I love, like on your website, you talk about one of your beliefs is that every challenge teaches us about our own resilience and strength. Everything happens for a reason. And I want to go in with the hard question of, what is the reason you think you've had 7 near-death experiences? Like, that is just mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, I question that myself sometimes. A lot of it's through, I've had a lot of illness. And so a lot of it comes through having anesthetics and all medical tests. And then that's when I've left. But I think part of it was for me to be understanding and empathetic and having to have those experiences so I can be empathetic to help others, when they have near-death experiences. And also, I think probably more so is about understanding that there's life after life and not to be frightened when we die. And that's one thing that I've learned. And also learning to live, because that's really important, because instead of living to die, it's learning to live while we're here.
Oh, I absolutely love that, learning to live, because it is a theme with people who do have near-death experiences. Like, they have this newfound lust for life, that they just, view the world in a totally different way. And I imagine having 7 of them, that gets amplified every time that you've had a near-death experience. Is there one that stands out to you as being a real, like, I'm sure they're all pivotal moments, but is there one that really stands out to you that you think, this was the one that was absolutely life-changing for me?
Yes, I already had psychic abilities that had opened up. I was 33 and I already had my 3 children. I had a a 7-year-old, and then I had a miscarriage between him and the next child who was 3. So 2 sons, and then a daughter who was 1. And I was having a lot of feminine issues, and I had to have an operation. And I knew, I kept having a vision that I was going to die. And I even got a will made the night before. And
Oh
everybody
my
thought I was
God.
being a bit silly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was quite terrifying. And I remember even my husband just like, stop, Debbie, you're just being stupid. Nothing's going to happen. You're only going to be in hospital for 3 days. It'll be fine. Don't worry. And I didn't know I was allergic to morphine. And
Okay.
when they were giving me the anaesthetic, I said to the doctor, I'm going to the light now. And he went, what are you talking about? And I said, yeah, I'm going to the light. And he said, what do you mean? And because I was crying, and he said, being a bit emotional, aren't you, dear? And I said, no, I'm going to the light now. So can you just make sure you bring me back? And they said, well, you can hang around and watch if you like. And I said, I don't like to see the sight of blood. I said, just make sure you bring me back. And then I remember them giving me the anaesthetic, and then as the doctor's looking at me, the colour just drained off his face. And then I remember I was sort of gone, and then I woke up. It was just a private hospital, so it wasn't actually, a sort of a full-blown medical, not medical, like having in the emergency section.
All the emergency services, yeah, weren't there. So if you're in a private hospital, yeah, wow.
I woke up, and I said to the nurse, and I was in so much pain, and I had this morphine drip like a button, and they said when the pain got bad, just push the button. So I was pushing the button, and then I started having these weird experiences, like I started hallucinating, and it was really quite horrific, the things that I was seeing. There was all these, because I was allergic to morphine, one of the allergy things, it's like you've got worms crawling under your skin, and I could see snakes under my skin and all these demons and this horrible imagery, and I was terrified. And I said to the nurse, I'm going to the light. And she's going, not on my shift, that's too much paperwork. Don't you dare do that to me. And so she started to keep monitoring me. And then she came in again, and then my heart started going, crazy, and I was getting more and more distressed. And then she said, I think we'll just get the drip. They ripped the drip out, and then my heart stopped. And then I went on the most incredible, beautiful journey I've ever been on. So after all the horrific demonic sort of imagery that I was getting, I started to see this. Of course, the typical, I saw the light. So I saw the tunnel of the light, and then I was going, it was like I was on a roller coaster, and I was part of everything, and I was going up. So for me, I always go up. So I was going up to the universe, up into space, and I was like an astronaut without a craft. And I was floating around, and I could see these other planets and stars, and I was mesmerized. It was the most colorful, vivid experience I'd ever had. Then I went into like a black hole and got sucked in again really quickly. It was like being on a roller coaster that was out of control, and I was a lot of shaking, and there was other beings going through to this tunnel. And then when I ended up coming up, and it sort of landed up into a meadow, and it was really strange. The meadow had other people there, and they were in a line in front of me, and then there was like a privet hedge with a little gate, and people were going through the gate. I could have stepped over the hedge, but I sort of was waiting in line. And when it was my turn, they told me I had to stop, and I was a bit annoyed. Like, I'm not like at the deli where you push in at the deli queue. I was like, I'd waited my turn, and I was ready to go through.
Let me in.
It was like, it's my turn. And there was a lot of people there, and it was more the feeling of love and kindness, and the colours were more vivid than what we have here on Earth. And I remember looking at the sky, and it was the bluest sky I'd ever seen. And the grass was a little bit longer, and it was a bit of a breeze, and it was swaying in the breeze. And I remember seeing people, and they were all smiling at me. And I don't remember who they are now, but at the time I felt like I recognised these beings. And I just felt the most amount of love I'd ever felt. And then they said to me, you must turn around. So I turned around, but it was like I was up in the sky, and my husband was on Earth with the children. And he had my daughter in his arm. He's holding my 3-year-old, and my 7-year-old was holding his hand. And the 2 older ones are saying, where's mummy?
Oh, God.
And my husband was pointing up saying, mummy's not here anymore. She's up there. She's in heaven. So every time I talk about it, I nearly cry. Then I remember looking down, and then I felt myself falling, and I woke up in the bed, and I was there again, and the doctors were running around me, and everyone's shaking me and trying to bring me back.
Oh my God. And did it feel like, it sounds so magical, so beautiful how you're experiencing, your experience there. Was it hard for you to come back, or did you have a moment to think about it? Did you resist it? What was it like in that moment?
It was hard to come back. It was so beautiful and so peaceful, but it was seeing my children and hearing their voices. That's what called me back.
Of course, yeah.
When I did come back, everything was different, and I had more gifts. I ended up having a vault hematoma, and I could see that in my body. And I ended up being in hospital instead of 3 days. I was in hospital for 6 weeks. So I had this blood clot. So they let me go home after a week, but then I knew there was an infection because I could see it. And I said to the doctor, I've got this big black spot on my left side. And he goes, how do you know? And he sent me for a CAT scan, and it was there. And he said, well, how do you know that? I said, I don't know, but I can see into bodies now. I was so wrong. Anaesthesis. He came to see me, and he said to me, I've only had 2 other patients ever tell me this, and they both died. And he said, but it was sort of, wasn't life-saving surgery, it was life-extending surgery because they knew they were still going to pass. And he said, but you're the only one I've ever had that you should have had a routine operation, you should have come back and you should have been fine. He said, but you went. He said, what did you see? You have to tell me. And so I was telling him what happened, and he couldn't believe it. And because he sat with me for about an hour and a half and we were discussing it. And then I ended up going home, and then I had to come back in for another 3 or 4 weeks. And it was weird. Everybody in the hospital had heard about me. So all these people were coming in visiting me to have readings. They wouldn't leave me alone.
I would have been there.
Over people.
Go away. And the hospital was built on an old orphanage, and a woman had fallen from a window or jumped from a window into the well. And the room I was in initially, it didn't have a bathroom in it. And I remember going into the bathroom there. And when I did, this woman started screaming at me to get out of the house. And then I found out later she was the woman that did.
Oh, gosh.
And there was little children running around. And then there was an elderly man who died at the hospital. And I walked through his room to get something when I was feeling a bit better. And then he started making all the electricals in the entire hospital were flashing on and off.
No way! Oh!
And so the nurses were coming in saying, Deb, can you go tell him to stop it? He's being annoying. Because they said, what does he look like? And I could see him, so I was telling him. So it was a crazy, crazy time in there.
You must be their most famous patient ever.
Or scariest, I don't know.
Yeah, one or the other.
They all have stories about you, that's for sure.
Definitely. And I had 2 of my children there because it's also a maternity hospital as well. So yeah, I've met lots of the ghosts.
I'm just trying to kind of step into your shoes here, Debbie, because not only have you just nearly killed yourself by pumping yourself full of morphine, you've died, gone and had this experience, come back, and now you're the talk of the town, seeing ghosts in the hospital. How are you feeling? Are you scared with this sudden, awakening into seeing more, feeling more? How are you feeling at this point?
It was a bit awe-inspiring, I'd have to say. I think it was just, I knew that I had the psychic abilities, but I felt that it was a sign that this is it. I'd already been doing readings, but on a small scale. I used to be a graphic designer. That I just sort of felt that this was it. It was my time. And then after coming back from the hospital, I couldn't sleep and I was in a lot of pain. And videos were out then, so it's quite a while ago. And I remember getting quite a few videos to watch in the middle of the night if I couldn't sleep. And the one that I got was Contact. And I sat there and watched that movie, and I cried and I cried and I cried, because it's like, that's the journey. It's like my journey, the journey that she went on.
And I'm going to try and skip into something for anyone that's listening, they're probably already quite mind blown at this point, but this next kind of part of your journey to me is just absolutely crazy as well. And I want to just talk a little bit about this transition that you had from spiritually awakening, which I believe happened, one of them happened when you were pregnant, which... Again, being pregnant and having a spiritual awakening is crazy, to having your first visions of the missing backpackers. Before we go into this, just from talking about myself here, I'm obviously English, and I came to Australia 20 years ago as a backpacker, and I always remember one of the first things that everyone would say to me leaving England is like, you've got to be careful, you don't go out on your own.
Yes.
It's Australia, it's a big country, there's desert, and people go missing. And I remember being scared to death of even being coined as a backpacker. And although it was years after that, you know, for any backpackers that have watched the movie Wolf Creek, you know, we are actually really scared of coming to Australia. And these backpackers obviously started to go missing in the late 1980s. And you had a vision of that, Debbie. Can you share what the hell happened there?
So I'd had my first son, and then I was pregnant and I had the miscarriage, and it opened it from then. And then when I was pregnant with my second son, on my third pregnancy, that's when it was really prevalent. And I was working at Fairfax Community Newspapers as a graphic designer typesetter. And I started to see all these things, and because it was in the news quite a lot back then, it was always something about, you know, the backpackers, and we didn't have the internet like we have now. So it was just constantly on the radio, the newspapers and the news. Then I started to dream about them, and I had no connection to any of it. And first of all, it was like, I'm watching too much television, I'm watching the news too much. But then I started to have visions about things before it was on the news, and then it got more and more. And one of the journalists at the community newspapers, I had said to him what I was seeing, and he thought it was just a bit of rubbish. And then some of the things I had told him started to come true. So he said, why don't we do a story about you? And they called me Julia. And they had the so they had the demographics of the newspapers. And there's about 50 different newspapers. And he said, which paper do you want to pick? And I picked the Macarthur Advertiser because I thought that whoever was connected to it lived in that area, which he did.
When you say visions, let's kind of rewind that a little bit. How do those visions come? Like, how does that look like if you were to try and describe that to our listeners that may have not ever had a vision?
For me, initially, it only came through a dream. So I'd go to sleep and I'd have a dream, and I could be the victim. I could
You could be the victim.
Yeah. Yes, I would feel and see everything. I could be the murderer and be the murderer killing the person or injuring the person. I was also like a witness. It was as though I was watching the movie, but I was in the movie. So I'm standing there as it's all taking place in front of me. And I felt like he knew I was watching him. Oh, it was very crazy.
I can't even imagine that. Did you have control over kind of jumping between who you were, like almost like lucid dreaming, where you can kind of control where you are?
Not initially, no. And it's very lifelike. I can smell things, I can see things, I can feel things. I would get clues and symbols. And then I taught myself to do it through a meditative state. So I started to meditate, and then I started getting more information, and I kept getting this message about Moreton Cave. And I didn't even know where Moreton Cave was, but the Moreton National Park is full of caves, and it was at the back of one of the Mlatz properties, and it's down and it backs onto Belanglo State Forest. But I had no idea about that at the time.
So what was the turning point of you, like, I guess, receiving the visions? They then do an article, which is huge in itself. Is there like a turning point where you started to have these dreams and visions where you went, oh shit, this is actually real? Like, I'm actually getting real evidence here.
Yes. Yeah, I had a couple of friends. We went down to Bowral together. Our husbands all played baseball together. So we went down to Bowral for the weekend. And when I went down there, a lot of things started to happen to me then. And one of my girlfriends, I kept telling her, and then she said, and it was all starting to come true. So she said to me, one of her close friends was a police officer. So she said, why don't I put you in contact with her and you can pass the information on? So she put me in contact with her. Then her husband was in the task force air at the time. So she put me in contact with him. And then it took a lot for them to sort of believe me. I mean, the two initial police officers were fine, but then they put me in charge of the head of the task force. So then they said, are you a psychic? And it's like, well, no, not really. I don't really know what's going on. I'm getting these things. And then they said, well, can you keep us a diary? But they wanted to know every doctor that I'd been to. Did I have mental health issues? Then when I started to know too much, where was I on certain dates? And why did I know these things? Was I an accomplice? Was I a suspect? So I had all of that thrown at me.
Oh my gosh, that's like, that's scary, because when you think about, you know, for anyone listening to this who may have had, like, I mean, there are always, you know, murders and missing persons cases in the news. if there's anyone listening to this who may have had some signs or signals coming through to them, it doesn't really encourage people to come forward if you're going to get that sort of line of questioning about your mental health, your movements, and you're almost on the suspect list, or I'm sure that's how you felt at that point in time.
And I've had that on a number of cases. I had another officer ask me to work on a case. He said to me, he wanted me to go down there, and at that stage I was working with some lovely guys from the dog squad, and he said if I went down there and I found this female's body, that I would be charged because I must have been the murderer. And I do all of my police work pro bono, so why am I going to put myself at risk? Go down there with the threat of being arrested. And the officer from the dog squad was laughing. He said, don't worry, it would be fine. He was going to accompany me anyway. But then in the end, I didn't end up going. And I just thought, why am I wasting my time? And it's quite traumatic with doing this work, because your body and your mind is going through all of this pain and suffering.
Yeah. And how do you, like, on that, I guess, this is not the only, you've worked on so many cases. Like, I mean, psychic detective, you're known for that. You're saying you do this as pro bono. You're able to view both the victim, the murder, all these different elements and aspects. And I know from, I guess, listening to some of your other interviews, knowing that you may also have contact with the victims' families as well. Like, that is a lot, like, I guess my background being a trauma-informed coach, like the vicarious trauma that comes with your second-hand experience, and in some cases, like, almost feeling like you're first-hand experiencing these. And you're doing all of this for free, with these, and I'm air quotes here, gifts that you have. Like, that to me sounds, pardon my French, fucking insane. It's like, how do you cope with all of that? How do you, how do you show up every day to say, yep, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to follow through with this. I'm doing it for no money. And there's a knock-on impact to your family as well, because I know that they have had, that there have been times where your family has been at risk. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? How you protect yourself, how you actually show up every day?
I don't do the investigations every day, but
Yeah.
So at least it might be, well, it used to be a lot more. I've pulled back. I choose not to work with the families because it's too traumatic for myself.
Yeah.
And look, some things, frankly, they don't need to know what happened. I think that's up to, because I'm seeing it psychically. If there's information that needs to be passed on, it needs to be passed on by the police.
Yes.
Or the authorities, because when you're seeing things psychically, not everything, it's like that it can be different meanings for different symbology or different things that you see. And with the pain, they don't need to know the pain and suffering that the person went through. I think for me, it's more about them being able to put their loved one to rest. Or in a lot of cases, look, I haven't ever found a body. I've done identikits, I've gone under hypnosis for cases, become the victim or the murderer, and the identikits when the murderer has been arrested, as in the Claremont serial killings, it was him. And I had done a young version and an aged version. But so I have done, and I worked on the Sue Neil Fraser Bob Chappell case in Tasmania. Again, I did identikits, and there are 3 people that were involved, and one of them, she's been interviewed, but the police down there chose not to do anything with it. And so poor Sue went to jail, and she was innocent. So that was really been very trying. But I've had death threats. I've had stalkers. I've had people break into my office. It's terrifying with some of the things. And I've had families get very angry with me because I didn't find the body. Yes. And I think trauma-wise for myself, not being able to find the body, you feel guilty. It's like you failed. Why couldn't I? And maybe it's more a matter of, I've always say psychics don't solve cases. I feel I'm more part of as an investigative tool that will be utilised.
Yes.
They have sniffer dogs. They have forensic, officers. They have identikit people. So for me, I can fill in some of the gaps. So there's some things that they might not have seen, but I can see there's another thread that goes through, or I've linked other murders up that they hadn't thought were connected.
Oh,
so,
wow.
So there's things there that they, it's more, I give them the information than they do with what they will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Debbie, I have to say, you're so brave. Honestly, the bravery is just super inspiring, because to put yourself out there in the world as it stands today, like, I'm a psychic medium, and only recently, a few years ago, everything I found really hard. Like, how do you go to the police knowing that half of them they may ridicule you or they don't believe you? And have you felt like there's some people that just believe and some people just don't? Like, what's the pushback that you get?
Definitely. And the line across Australia is police don't work with psychics, but I've worked with officers in every state bar South Australia.
Wow.
Off record and on record and on record. And that's one of the reasons I really have a big decision of whether I want to continue, is because of what happened to me with the Lynn Dawson case and the teacher's pet. You know, I've had an absolutely horrific experience with that. I worked with the police in 2003 on that case, and I was very close to the family, and they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful people.
Yeah.
I'm glad the podcast went ahead in the fact that he was charged. So that was the good thing. The bad thing is I was thrown under the bus because the police recording was given to the person from the podcast without any of my permission. I've never met this man, and he took all the audio and edited it down and put it in the podcast. And
no.
Yeah, without me even having any say or signing off on anything. Then I had to go to court over it. And they tried to get the case thrown out of court because I was one of the first psychics that have ever been on record involved in a police case. Yes. They were trying to say because of that, they wanted to throw the case out. So I was getting the blame. It was like I was in a witch hunt.
It's disgraceful, and it doesn't surprise me at the same time that do you look into the future and feel like there's going to be any type of change in terms of your work and generally how people are accepted?
For me, I would rather go in the direction of the education space now and helping others. I have had a lot of people ask me to teach them the psychic forensic side of things. And I know there's another medium overseas that she already does that, but she comes and does courses here and then she goes home, and then I get inundated with people. And I really think the police are not ready for that at the moment. But that being said, there's a wonderful group in America that I was a member of. I just don't have the time to do it at the moment. It's called findme.org. And I'm sure it's findme.org. It's Find Me anyway, because I've changed the name a couple of times. So they have retired law enforcement in the States, and they have sniffer dogs, and they have psychics and mediums all around the world who you join to be a member, but you volunteer your time for free. And they work on cases all around the world, and they're very, very successful. You know, and
shakes on that.
Yeah, and it's really wonderful.
That's fantastic. And I think it just shows you that, yes, and maybe this is my background in change, like there are always times when, you know, people are not ready for a change, but you're activating change, you're initiating change, you're building, like, and through your teaching work, you're building that groundswell of people who are becoming more open and becoming more accepting. And even for some people, just planting a seed, like I know personally of one particular police officer who listens to this podcast, and we have some interesting conversations. So it's like, I don't think you need to plant a seed in his mind, but there are lots of people that even through listening to a podcast, having a conversation, that we just start to open people up to what's possible. Because, you know, we all get into these kind of lines of work because we want to help people. We don't want to see families left with unresolved, not knowing what happened to their loved ones. So there's definitely encouragement there that, you know, keep doing what you're doing. Like, obviously not at your own expense. Like, and yes, maybe it shifts more into the teaching space than the psychic detective space, or the balance and the ratio of that work is different. But there's no doubt about it that there is a need for more psychic teachers out there, more people that are helping us open up to our abilities. And if you're not opening up to your abilities, that at least you're opening up in your level of awareness and accepting that, yes, this is part of human nature. This is part of the human condition. We just have it suppressed so much.
I totally agree there. Yes. And I think with COVID, it's changed a lot. Like, because a lot of people were stuck at home by themselves. So they were left to their own devices. So they started to be getting, you know, probably opening up in gut feelings, and also the devices have taken away some of our connection, but some in other ways, look, we wouldn't be doing this, would we be on Zoom?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's the other part of the technology.
And that is exactly what happened to me, COVID, and I suddenly awakened to all of this new skill set that I have. Now, this is the first time I've shared this in a public forum, so I'm kind of like trying to be really brave from you. But recently, Debbie, for the first time ever, I don't watch the news at all. But I saw a photograph of someone that came up on social media and received this crazy flash of information. The information that I got turned out it was about Samantha Murphy, which is the missing lady currently from Ballarat. Now, I've never had anything happen like that before. I've shared it with Diane. It freaks me out. I got all sorts of information. And I'm sure that this might happen to other people too. What the hell does someone do in that scenario? I know that Diane said straight away, you've got to go and give someone that information. But I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can trust, what's coming through to me here, when it was just all very specific but very random, because I didn't know anything about the story of Samantha Murphy until after I received the visions. Do you have any advice?
And it's difficult because I've asked the police about it, because a lot of people will come to me and say, well, you can put me in contact with the people you work with, but each case has got a different person, and some people are open, some people are not. All the police have said to me, you just tell them the people to ring Crime Stoppers. But then does it go any further? I don't know. But I think write everything down that you have. But it's also, pass it on to Crime Stoppers, because maybe it's parts of a puzzle. But I personally, sometimes I feel it doesn't really go anywhere, and it's very frustrating. You could go down the line of contacting the family, but then there's all the other dramas that go with that as well. So I think that's what I mean. So that's why I'm saying it's a really terrible area, because it's like with a lot of the information I get, and I watch the news, or I see a photo and it's like, I don't want to know that. I went on holidays and Theo Hayes had just gone missing up at Byron, and I was up there to have a bit of a rest because I'd been quite sick, and I just wanted, and then suddenly there was search teams everywhere and he wouldn't leave me alone. And it was like, God, I can't even go on holidays without this happening.
Gosh.
So I know what you mean. It's a difficult one. I think writing it all down, and I personally, I would have liked, I don't think it's going to be possible though, is to set up a group in Australia like Find Me, where, and I have spoken to police about this, about where you have special training. You'd have to be trained to do it, similar to what Find Me do. They sort of have different ways. And then that information would be relayed straight back to police to say the unsolved crime, or the unsolved homicide unit, or the missing persons unit. That's what I would ideally like, but I just don't know that the infrastructure's there, and there's not enough police at the moment. They have enough trouble just dealing with their day-to-day, and you think of how many people go missing a day, and look at Samantha. She's been missing for, 4 weeks now?
Yeah. Have you received any information on that? Like, does it just kind of happen to you randomly?
Yeah, I've been trying not to look at it, because it's like, otherwise I know I will pick up on it. I can read photographs. So I just look at a photo, and the photo will talk, and it's more like the photos at a moment in time. But it's like I go into the photo and I see what they're doing, where they are. So I can do it if I tune in. I used to do what's known as psychometry or clairtangency, but I don't do that anymore since COVID. You don't, and I actually ended up with long COVID. So that's why I'm sort of another reason why I'd sort of keep doing things remotely now, because I can't risk my immune system's pretty bad since that.
Sorry, Diane, just one last question to sneak in before we leave this topic. Obviously, the most famous missing persons case probably in the world is that of Madeleine McCann. Have you ever received information or dealt with that case?
I've been asked to talk about it on many occasions. I have picked up information. It's very, very sad what happened. What frustrates me, there's millions of children that go missing, and it upsets me that and it's like John Bonet as well, that all the media is focused on these little ones when there are other ones out there. Like, there's a lot of financial resources that have been put into it, but there are others that don't seem to matter. It's like, why is that little one? And all children, anybody missing is very important, but why is everything only focused on that one, when, especially with Madeleine McCann, there's a lot in that area that have gone missing? Why does everybody just focus on that little girl, not on other resources? So what I've thought about, because I've had this question asked of me before, I focus my energy on the ones where I feel I can make a difference. And I feel if it's localized, yes, I have been asked to work on overseas cases, which I've helped a lot with some cases up in Canada, in America. I've got, there's quite a lot I've done, but I feel sometimes I tune in and think, if I can make a difference, I'll put my energy into it. But I feel there's so many resources thrown at Madeleine McCann, and I don't think the truth's ever going to come out, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, Debbie, thank you for that, that advice to call Crime Stoppers just in general, because for anyone who is listening, and I guess like Liz's recent experience, it's, we can hold on to information ourselves, but then we bear responsibility for that. If we don't do anything with it, it can't go anywhere else. Whereas at least if there is one avenue, one call that we can make, and, personally, this is my own personal judgment on it, to go to the police rather than the family, I think is a more sensitive thing to do. But if you go to Crime Stoppers, then, trust in the universe that if it is meant to go through, it will go through. But at least you can sleep a little bit better at night knowing you've done something with it, that little data point, that little piece in the puzzle, as you talk about, that information has gotten out there, and hopefully that it does help, bring resolution or bring finality to someone who has a loved one who is missing, or, who has been murdered. Any of those, really horrific cases, it just means that, and that one little pearl of wisdom, that one little bit of advice, I think will be very helpful for anyone who does get these sorts of flashes or things that are coming through, because definitely people are waking up more and more to these spiritual gifts. So I just imagine whether you're listening to this podcast as it's released or whether it's 2 years from now, there will be more people who are, these senses are coming online for them. Yeah. I do want to shift gears completely, and now this is a topic that's very close to my heart, and I have to say I've been following your work for quite some time, but your soul quest to the UK, it lit my whole body up like a pinball machine. So this spirit soul quest, I think that you termed it, going off to the UK last year, the places that you'd gone to, and I probably don't know all of them, but the Callanish Stones, Isle of Lewis, Glastonbury Tor, Tintagel, Arthur Findlay College. For me, it was like, oh my God, these are all on my bucket list. I absolutely would love to go to. So I was avidly following on Facebook some of your posts on that, and I just want to read something out, and I'm going to read this word for word if that's okay. So this is on a Facebook post, and it said, I was seeking answers to many questions. I did receive some answers, but in turn have many more questions that I need to explore. I met the wise ones who visit me in my dreams and meditations, and have felt blessed for their sacred connection to this life and my previous ones. I now have a sense of where I've come from and where I belong. I yearn to return to these locations, as leaving and returning home to Australia was like leaving a part of my soul behind. Feeling guided and blessed from above with understanding of my soul. My whole body is lighting up here as I'm saying
beautiful.
this. And for those who are not watching on YouTube, Debbie has reached for the tissues, and I'm feeling it as well, because I had such a soul connection to what you wrote there. Not just all the places you'd been, but that sense of being yearning was the word that stood out for me.
Yeah.
But it's been, around about 6 months, I think, since you've come back.
Yes.
I guess when you reflect on that now, and you distill, we did a recent episode on being pulled and being called to things, what was it that called you to that quest? And what are some of the major insights that you've had since you've come back and had some, processing and integration time?
Yeah. I didn't even expect to be going. My children, one of them's just moved to Amsterdam, and then my daughter was traveling through Europe, and then I was 60 last year, and they said, Mum, why don't you come and meet us for our, for your 60th? And we had a new puppy, so my husband stayed home and minded the puppy, and he's not into this stuff, so in a way I was kind of happy that he did, so we could run around the stones and do whatever we wanted. I'd always wanted to go to Arthur Findlay College, so I went there first, and it was like Harry Potter for grown-ups, to be honest.
Yes.
And some of the stuff we did was just crazy, like the old-fashioned stuff of getting the mediums to sit in the box with the curtain, with the curtain, and doing the channeling, and they were getting trumpets and trying to get them to play, and really crazy stuff. And it was very interesting. I met some beautiful people. A lot of people come from around the world, so it's very intense. It's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days. So it's pretty
Oh.
full on. So you're kind of up at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's like you're at boarding school for psychics. You know, you've got
Yeah.
to do things. You go to your class and then you do, you know, and it's out in the middle of the countryside. There's these horses there, and you know, it was kind of weird. And I actually had a very challenging experience there, and I thought I would before I went, because the teacher I had was not one I wanted to go the week later, but it didn't fit in with meeting the kids. And I knew when I saw this teacher that I was going to have a challenge. Anyway, I should have just listened. But, you know, being psychic, no, it'll be fine. Anyway, I did. I had this very, very big challenge with this woman. And it was weird. One of the messages I kept getting, it was about peacocks and peacockery. And I won't go into all of it, but it was funny. Spirit was giving me signs. So I was really, really cross this day. I had this conversation with this person, and I didn't know the town. You've got to go through all these fields to get into the town. It's at Stansted Hill. So I, one of the others there that had been there before, took me into the town, and I get into town, and there's this sign saying, beware of slow moving peacocks. I mean, how many times did you see that on a sign? And I was like, I was laughing my head off, and I thought, yep, you're telling me, you give me a sign there, Spirit, because I was getting really cross. Anyway, I went back, did the rest of the week, and then this person, there was another discussion, and I decided I wasn't going to attend the class that day. So I went back into town, and I found a peacock feather on the ground when I was at the front of the shops, and I thought, that's interesting. But anyway, I did enjoy myself, and I learned a lot. But it was just, it was an interesting thing. But I just found it funny how out of all the places in England, you wouldn't think you're going to see peacock signs and find peacock feathers when you're getting peacock symbology.
Absolutely.
So, the synchronicities there are just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But then I went up to Scotland.
Yes.
Sorry,
yeah. No, it was actually Scotland where I wanted to go in particular. Like, I know you saw so many stone circles, and Callanish in particular is one that calls to me. So tell me.
Yeah, tell us about the energy, what happened.
Oh my God, it's so amazing. Before I went, I kept having these dreams about these hooded beings in these purple cloaks. I never saw their faces, but I would, I'd be dreaming, and I'd be down in these crystal caves, and kept having these images. And then I said to my daughter, I want to go to Callanish, and she said, "What? Where's that?" And it's a little island off, in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland, and it's not all that easy to get to. But that was my main thing. So I went out to Edinburgh, and I met my daughter there, and then we went across, and we stayed in this incredible pod, and it was just 2 minutes walk from the stones. And the people that host the pod are just the most delightful people. And so each day I would walk up, and my daughter and I watch Outlander, so we would just like put their hands on the stones and just laugh and go, ha ha, see what happens. And I did it
for time travel.
And it started. It was real, and it was freaking me out. And so you put your hands on the stones, and I could feel the energy shifting, and then I could feel myself being actually pulled in, like not physically, spiritually. I felt myself being pulled in, and then I was seeing all of these beings, and the hooded beings were surrounding me, and I'm like, whoa, this is a bit like weird kind of thing. And then I took my hands off. I said to my daughter, I didn't tell her what I saw. I said, go and this is in the main stone, because this particular circle, it's not really a circle, it's more like a cross shape, and it's the largest one in the UK and the oldest one. So, and in the middle, there's like an area where they'd found some remains of bones many years ago, and a lot of the circle was covered by peat moss, and it's been dug out over the years. So there's sort of tide marks on the stones, so you can see where they've sort of been exposed.
Yeah.
That, you can just freely walk up to them. And so she did the same. And then I said to her, what did you see? She said, oh, Mum, that's a bit strange. But I could see all these fires, and like fires being lit, and all these people standing there. And I had seen the same. And she said, and there's all these beings, Mum. But you know what I found the most interesting? The hooded beings were female. And because I said to them, please show me your face. Because I thought, what are these things? And they were like Celtic goddesses, and they were showing me all this symbology. And then we found there are some other, it's quite a few stone circles on the island, and they're quite hard to find. So there's Callanish 1, 2, 3, and 4, but 4's a bit hard to get to. But 2 and 3, you've got to drive around sort of the bay to go to them, and they're smaller sizes. But the vision I got after putting my hands on the biggest stone circle is the fires were in the distance, and when we went to the other stones, it looked like they had lit the fires so that the other stone circles were all lit up at the same time as like some form of celebration.
Yes, yes. And I know that's something that
Wow.
happens in Ireland, like on hilltops and things like that. Yeah, from ancient times. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Beacons of fires and fire festivals around Belton. Yeah,
Oh, really? Well,
that's,
that's what
yeah,
they were showing.
yeah,
But I saw other beings. I don't know that it was only human beings that have created these, because I was seeing other worldly beings,
yes.
I call them.
Mm.
And they talk about the giants, and I was seeing beings that were like the giants, and I didn't even know all about this. I probably should have researched before I went, but in a way, I think I'm better. It's better I went
Better.
there ignorantly, because then I could back up what I saw when I got home.
We'll have to
You can cut it
yeah,
in.
put some photographs on there as well, because I'm already just getting
Absolutely.
visions of me and you, Diane, being there at those stones. I still want to
Uh,
go there.
Oh,
I do. And
yeah,
I
clever
need to.
cons.
Ah, yes.
Ah, yes, yes. And did you find, like, so this is something that I found myself on going to stone circles, that sometimes there's like more masculine or more feminine energy, like, so there's, or that there's a more I don't want to say negative, but it's like that, you know, something that, like, there's just a denser energy to some of them than other ones are a lot more magical, you know, like maybe even fairy like. I just know that
Yes.
I experience that when I go, and it's one of the first things that I tune into. It's like, what's the major overarching energy of a circle or an ancient site.
Definitely. I felt that Clavicans was more a communal. There was a lot of, I felt there was very male energy, but I feel that there was different times or different rites that they would do around the stones, because I felt that there was a bit more of a masculine dominating, like to do with tribal energy
Mm.
there. But then I felt when the
Yes.
females came, they were kind of there. It's almost like they were the wise ones, and they sort of made sense of things and to settle things down, is the feeling that I got with
Yeah.
those. Clavicans was very feminine energy to me. And I felt like we were there in the summer. So I've seen pictures of it when it's actually when all the leaves are off the trees, you know, in the fall or the
Yeah.
winter. But it's very, you can see the fairies, and there was all like little lights coming through the trees, and we were getting lots of lens flare. But I just felt like I wanted to skip around and sing in there. It was just so
Yes.
Oh,
wonderful. It was, and we
beautiful.
found it by accident. I hadn't researched that one, and my daughter said, "Let's go to Culloden, Mum," because we're going. We couldn't get a plane to where we wanted to, so we had to go to Inverness to fly down to Skye.
Yes.
Um, yeah, not to Skye. No, had to go down further. We went to Inverness for something. I'm just trying to think what we went there for. No, I had to pick a car up from there, so I had to fly to Inverness, and then I had to drive down to Skye because I couldn't get flights and cars to match up. But I think that was for a reason. So when we went there, yeah, that was wonderful. And even walking around Culloden, all we could hear was all the soldiers screaming out, or them
Oh,
yelling commands and hearing the gunfire.
yeah.
We were sort of walked around by ourselves, and it was a very hot and still day, and there was no one around us. And we both stopped and we could hear it. And my daughter said, "Can you hear that, Mum?" And you could hear bagpipes. You could hear everything. It
Oh,
was just crazy.
all the
So,
sounds of
all
the
of that,
battlefield. Yeah.
yeah, that was all happening. And so we went from there down to Clavicans. So Clavicans was so calm. It was kind of like, oh, this is so nice after being in the battlefields. It was kind of that special
Yeah.
reconnection and rejuvenation, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, you've definitely inspired me through your trip to just, yeah, like, I'm going home to Ireland for 6 months, and I'm going to definitely do a trip that's, you know, Scotland down through the UK and go to, and as I said, so many of where you've been are already on the list. So I might be hitting you up for some, hitting you up
Yes.
for some from points.
And it sounds as though there's psychic abilities passing down in your family as well there, Debbie. Is your daughter fully open and skilled in that area?
She is actually my son, probably more so my middle son, because I was
Oh,
pregnant with him when all of the backpackers and everything was going on. He's
Yes.
incredible with what he can do. And he channels, and he's an artist. So he sort of channels things through his paintings. And that's one of the reasons he's moved
Oh,
over
yeah.
um, to Amsterdam. But yeah, him and his name's Blake. So I have Ryan, Blake, and Shannon. Ryan, my eldest, is the one, the big skeptic that didn't want to know about it, and he's a remedial massage therapist now. And when people are getting massages, because he does sacrocranial massages, and he did one for
Oh,
me, and I was saying, "Oh, I'm seeing all these colours," and he goes, "That's really weird, Mum, because the lady that came yesterday, she said that," and he's getting all these clients that are all seeing all these things, and so
oh,
yes.
he's
look at
now finally open.
that.
Where it was like, "Oh, it's a lot of crap, Mum," or he didn't want to know. But
Yeah.
yeah, Blake's always seen, he's always had people around him and seen people. Blake had a past life as a soldier, and we discovered that when he was 21 by accident. So that was really crazy, because he used to dream about people in his room or tell me the men who are in his room and they had their arms and legs missing and nails in their heads. And it was kind of like a little 2-year-old telling you that, you're thinking, oh my God, this is terrifying.
When he was
and
2?
He was 2, and he used to freak out if we used to have curtains, no blinds, but if you had the curtains and the curtains would move, he would be freaking out and screaming. And he used to tell all these stories about these men, and then he would only wear army clothing. Like I had to get child size or make things in camouflage material, because he'd only wear that till about 13 or 14. And we had to go to every single Anzac Day, no matter what, which just drive us nuts. And I was writing my book Always With You, and I was on deadline, and I'm a bit annoyed because sometimes I'll go onto the internet and I'll go on eBay or just do anything just to procrastinate and do what I was supposed to do. Yeah, I'm bad. And it was actually Anzac Day. So we'd gone to Anzac Day early in the morning, came home, and then Ancestry.com kept flashing up on my screen saying it was free for Anzac Day. And I didn't check. I was checking like it was free for First World War, not Second World War, but I didn't check that. So it's bouncing at me, and I thought, it kept annoying me. And I'm trying to write, and I thought, oh, for goodness sakes, I'm going to click it just to see. So I clicked it and put it in there, and then I put my grandfather's name, whose name was Bernard Ernest G, and it wouldn't light up, because then I realised after a little while he was Second World War. But this other man kept bouncing, and it was highlighting on the screen, and saying, click me, and it kept doing it. So I clicked it, and his name was Walter Ernest G, and I thought, well, you're not my grandfather, but anyway, for some reason you're making me click to see what's going on. And my eyes nearly popped out of my head when I clicked on it, because he was born on my son's birthday exactly 100 years before.
Oh.
And so it was like, oh, okay, it's a bit interesting. And he discharged from the army on my birthday. And I thought, okay, that's a bit more interesting. And then he lived around me where my grandfather lived when my dad was young. So they lived around Kingsford. So I thought, oh, okay, so he was in Australia. I thought, out of all the soldiers in the whole of the world, there's something that's going on here. And then I started going a bit further, and my son said he was always going to be a gunner and be a tradie. This man was a gunner, and he was also an electrician. So he was a tradie. Okay. And I thought, oh, okay. And then he had brown eyes and he had brown hair, but he was a bit shorter than what my son is now. And then I tracked him back, and my office was at Sutherland, and Warrenora Cemetery is at Sutherland. Then I clicked a bit further, and then he was actually buried in unmarked grave at Warrenora Cemetery. So his remains were scattered on ground, and he died in 1968, and I was born in 1963. And I thought, well, this is a bit weird. So I went up to the cemetery with my divining rods and my son, and we found
I love that. Son in one arm, divining rods in the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Just imagine it.
So we're up there with the divining rods. Everyone's looking at us like, who are these crazy people? And we found some of his family members. We found his wife's grave site with no headstone. So there's all these headstones either side and just an empty spot, but the number was correct. And then Blake went under hypnosis because he was really intrigued by that. And then he was him, and he got mentions in dispatches, which is like the Victoria Cross in Australia. Blake's memory was always, we've got to save them. And he said he had a memory of carrying some of his mates on the battlefield and bringing them back into the trenches. And once he did that, he didn't really need to do anything about army stuff anymore. It just sort of went away. So it kind of gave him closure on that life.
Yes, like that is fascinating. And it just shows you, those things that we get pulled to, we get called to, or even as parents, we don't understand why our kids want the camouflage pajamas. It's like, but things that don't go away are there for a reason. And like, I love how you close that story, or the closure for your son, the fact that, I don't need to go that direction. It's like, now it makes sense to me. Now I understand it's just part of a past life. It's part and parcel of who I am. It's not something that I'm being called towards. Yeah, I just love, like, not every mother is going to go, pulling the thread to do the investigation of, okay, let's go to the cemetery, let's go to Ancestry.com, let's go, let's do all of these things. But I just think if we can encourage listeners to tune into those things, especially those little things that just keep, you mentioned it about the peacocks and, peacock feathers and things like that. There are things that will just keep coming up for us. So tune into them as much as we possibly can. Like, I love that story. I was totally lit up as you were saying it, because that past life connection, and to have it validated, like to have it so validated in so many ways, is fantastic.
I'm always the skeptic, even though I do this as a job full time. I always want proof, and I feel like when I need the proof, it's more or less presented in front of me, or thrown in front of me. And I think that's one of the things I encourage for all of us when we get these gut feelings or inner knowings, and it's repetitive, it's for a reason. So we do need to look further into it and explore it and see what it is, because it could be signs and symbols from loved ones from the past, or past lives from the past, or information to help us, to guide us into our future as well.
A true investigator, Debbie. I can say that. Oh, I feel like I could honestly just talk to you and ask you questions for another few days. But I want to leave you with one question here, because, when we look on social media, or we're someone that follows spiritual influencers, or we're even going through spiritual awakenings ourselves, we're all feeling and we're hearing that there is this huge shift of consciousness. And I would love to hear from your perspective, what is happening in the world right now?
It's a huge shift. But the trouble is, I call it the haves and the have-nots. So the haves are having the awakening and they're wanting to explore and discover. The have-nots, sometimes it's more, people are becoming more selfish as well, and more self-absorbed, and more worried about money and belongings and, fame and power. And I think the have-nots are starting to really investigate it more and wondering why. And sometimes people, they start because, why is that person luckier than me? Why does that person have more money than me? I work harder, or there's that side of things. But it's also this other side of, sometimes we think when they have not, why don't we have this? But it could be sometimes we need to look within. And I think once we look within, that's when we see the gifts we have. They're built in us. And I do see that there's these abilities that we all have, and people are really exploring it. I keep getting symbols of water lilies or lotus flowers, and I'll do a reading for someone, and suddenly they'll present the water lily, and it's starting to just open up. And when you look at these flowers, there's many, many layers. And then even when you've got to the petals, then you see the actual inside. And it's like those universal patterns that we get in flowers, or, like the circle of life images. When you look at the flower, it's got that. And it's many,
sacred
many layers.
Geometry.
Exactly. And I think that's what's going on, is that we are starting to look, and we are all born psychic, and we have these 8 psychic clairs, and they coexist with our 5 senses. But people kind of think, it's a bit of a weird thing, but it's there, and we might not have put a name to it, or sort of put a sense to what it's there for. You might smell something, or you might smell grandma's hairspray, and grandma's being passed, and you smell cereal, or you might smell powder, or her baking. And you smell it for a few seconds and it's gone. It's like, oh, that's my imagination, but it's actually a sign from above. Or we look at an image, or you might get number sequences with someone's initials on a number plate in front of you, and then you're thinking of them, or you even think of someone and you haven't seen them for a while, and you turn around the corner and there they are. So there's a lot of these synchronicities, but we haven't been really putting the energy into them, and probably not sort of saying, oh yeah, that was something special. It's like, well, that's just a coincidence, but it's not. It's a sign from above.
It is. Oh, I just feel like you're such a natural teacher, and I know that there are going to be lots of our listeners that are going to kind of go and follow you up, and we'll put all of your links to your website and all of your social media in the show notes. And there's books that we can read of yours. You've got oracle decks, and do you have anything that we should go and check out right now that you're going to be doing in the future?
I'm starting to do online group readings, and there'll be once a month. I do readings for as many people as I can in the audience, but we talk about, discuss, signs and symbols from above, and I will be running more workshops connected with my book, Awakening Your Psychic Abilities, and I'm a numerologist. So I'll be doing things with that. I'm hoping to do run some in-person workshops at somewhere, say Uluru or somewhere like that. So I'm looking at doing that. I think that would be wonderful. There's a lot of sacred goddess energy. That males are all welcome as well. But I just sort of feel there's a lot going on with the energies at the moment.
Oh yes, can you let us know about that first, please, Debbie? We'll be there.
Definitely. Well, I'm working on writing a deck of cards connected to my connections from the stones, and I'd like to write a book about it as well, because there's one thing I should have said to you before. When I went to Avebury was the place. I've been to Stonehenge in the past, and when we went this time, it was an absolute total disaster. The tour got mucked up, and I didn't get to do the up close thing. Then it poured rain, and I didn't even get to the stones properly. We sort of got to the car park, and because of the bus, it was some things just don't work out. It's just, that's me.
Yeah.
They call me Disaster Deb sometimes. It's like, yep, okay, that was that day. But Avebury, when I went there, I was, you're talking about male and feminine stones. I was walking along. At first I was just walking along, and then I thought, I'm going to touch the stones, and I touched each one, and each one felt different.
Yes.
And some are male, some are female. And when I was on the plane coming home, I got a download of all these symbols. There was so many symbols, and especially down in Tintagel and St Nectan's Glen, there's beautiful energy down there. That's just so sacred. That for me is heaven. If I could live somewhere, I would live there, or on Callanish. They're my two places I'd live. But Glastonbury, of course, is good. But Avebury, there's just something there, and they were showing me and saying that this is a male energy, this is a child energy. So as you walk down the avenue at Avebury, each one was different. But I was putting my hands on the stones, and some of the symbols, all of them were taking me into the stones. Each one was different, but some of the energy, put my hand, and the energy would radiate out, and so they're giving me lines going out. Others were sort of going clockwise and anti-clockwise. It's though some were taking me back in time, some were taking me forward in time. Some were the crone stones, where the wise woman would be, and then there would be the warrior kind of stones. So it was really, really interesting. I really want to go back there and spend like a few days, or probably a week. Probably a week wouldn't be enough, but just to go down the avenue and just be there. I didn't have a lot of time because I had just dropped my son at the airport, so I had like an hour and a half. The kids say, "Come on, Mum, hurry up, touch the stones," and I'm touching all the stones.
Let's get out of here. Like, no, you like don't understand. I need time.
And it's like, no, I want to go. And then I wrote all my notes on the plane, and I left the notepad in the back of the plane seat, and I'm like, oh,
no.
What was I thinking?
Oh gosh. No.
Trust that it's all still there. Meditate and tune into it and channel it again. It's all like, it passed through you. You still have that.
It did because I was really sick before, because I had to get these cortisone shots. I've got a collapsed disc in my neck, and I had to get cortisone shots, and I was really sick, and I was in bed for a couple of days, and I'm lying there, and the computer and my husband thinks that's my new boyfriend, because my laptop and I go everywhere. I'm lying in bed, and then suddenly I started getting the signs of the stones again, and they gave me a name, and I put the name in, and I Googled it, and it went to a site that had these symbols I'd been seeing, and I didn't even know what it was. And there's the site came up, and they were all there, and it was like, thank you. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I need to know what that site is. You've got. If you don't remember it now, you need to let us know, and we'll put it into the show notes as well, because I'll be geeking out on Google.
Oh my god.
It's funny how they bring things back.
Oh, fantastic.
You are just so interesting, honestly. We have to have you back if you'll ever come and spend some time with us again.
I would love it. There's lots of topics we could talk about. I had so much fun.
So much fun. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your stories. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can already just imagine how many listeners are going to reach out with questions and with stories after this chat. So thank you again, and keep doing great in the world, and hopefully we'll be on one of your next workshops. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. You've got such beautiful energy. I'm so pleased that you asked me to be here.
That's it for another episode.
Thank you for listening. Did you know that we are building a movement of 1 million people who are spiritual as fuck? We would love for you to join us. You can start by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. Every month, I'm going to intuitively choose one person and do a psychic reading for you. So
follow us on Instagram, send in your stories and topic suggestions, and join the movement
at spiritual.a.f. Until next time. This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.